Hello and welcome to Identity Office Hours. I'm your host, Mike Schwartz, founder of Glue, and today is episode 58, Corporate Wallets. Our guest today is Alan Horvat, lead architect for blockchain serverless infrastructure, otherwise known as EBSI. Welcome, Alan.
Hi, great to be here.
From his card today, so hardcore committed guests. And our co-host today is Natawut Kangsuwan, who is an architect and technologist at Finima. And I'm sorry because I accidentally overwrite Alan's title with yours. So what's
Oh,
your exact title, Natawut?
my exact title is innovation manager.
Right, I remember that. Okay, yeah, and that's a cool title. And so thank you for being here.
Thank you for
And
having me.
And why don't we start with introductions? Alan, how did you find yourself as a blockchain decentralized identity guru?
Well, uh, at first I studied physics, which is extremely interesting. I believe important part of my life and gave me a lot of problem-solving abilities. And when I finished my studies and my PhD, kind of blockchain started to become more and more popular and like interesting as a technology. So I joined Netis, which kind of started the building like enterprise blockchain related applications and networks. And suddenly, I mean, the first problem you always need to solve is related to digital identity. And shortly after, there was this project that started called EBSI, so European Blockchain Services Infrastructure, where there was an opportunity to design and build a European infrastructure for blockchain-based applications, and then also identity was really like big or is big use case on it. So then I slowly shifted towards digital identity space because once that is solved, many new application and opportunities open.
Well, solving it, I don't know if that's going to happen in our lifetime, or I know you just have young kids, or in their lifetime, but we'll see. We're doing our best to move the ball forward at least. Nanavut,
Amen.
how did you end up in the identity space?
Sure. Right. So there's like a happy coincidence that okay, I also had a background in physics. So I went to a graduate school in London to do physics, and then I found out that after I finished my graduate school, I just got bored of physics, and I wanted to change. And then my a friend of mine was like founding a company based on blockchain identity, and then he invited me to join his company, and that's where I get started in the identity space, and has been around for the past. I have been there for the past 5 years. Yeah, and one thing I really like about identity is that uh, I can see a way forward for what I do to to helping the society and make the world a better place, to put it that way. Compared to what I did during my study, my research was like so far removed from the real world, and it's like I did not even know that what I did back then is going to contribute in any way to the real world in the next 20 or 30 years, right? It's like so far remote, and it's too far to grasp and to feel the impact of what I did, right? So identity, right, is like helping the actual people, improving the security of the internet, improving privacy, and I can see and justify the work to myself that is helping the world.
And um, I see exactly what you're saying. But I'll say one thing about physicists. Here at Glue, we're partial to hiring physicists because they're really intellectually rigorous. Applying, I think, that physics background to any work is really brings a lot of value to whatever you're doing. So it's a great, just the intellectual, I think, discipline of physics is a good match for engineering in general. So we're glad to have you in the industry. So this topic, I'm going to, Alan, thank you suggesting this topic because actually there wasn't a ton of homework. I think I went down a rabbit hole on LEIs, but in a way it's hard to assign a blog or an article on this topic because it's so new. It really hasn't happened yet. And we're talking about a potential future that might happen. The idea that we have digital identity wallets in the government space for citizens. But I think what we're talking about here is, will this extend to businesses and corporations, which it seems like it will or it might. And maybe we could just start off with a question of, do you think that this is something that is likely to happen, that businesses will start to issue their own decentralized credentials to their workforce or partners or other ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, depends on how we look at it, because I would argue that from one point of view, I would say these organizational wallets kind of already exist, but they are not used as much or utilized to the extent they could be. Because there are two views about organizational wallets. One is the one you just mentioned, is what I would call an employee wallet that is expressing a right what someone. So first is expressing a fact that someone is employed by the company. The second is expressing what that person can do on behalf of the company. But the second view, it's a bit more open because or it's a bit more abstract, because we know that organizations also have documents. They also own identifiers, and most of these, like business identifiers, like VAT number and others, they are today not like cryptographically bound to like a public key. However, creating that link essentially creates what we could call a logical structure of an organizational wallet. And I mean, now I'm really pushing the boundary, but the basic is like web authentication, right? So web authentication already exists, right? There's a domain name bound to a public key, and it's like it's what one could argue it's a very basic organizational wallet that can be used for a particular purpose, right? And then extending it to other, like extending the logic to other business identifiers businesses use, could then result with this logical structure that is of course controlled by someone within the organization to perform different actions, to authenticate, identify, reshare the documents, prove facts about the company, and so on. So this is kind of the view. So the idea might not be that far from reality as we may think.
And Natu, do you have any thoughts on, has Finma been working on wallets in the wallet space? And do you have any thoughts about wallet adoption in the private sector?
Well, for Finima, we are working mostly with the government of Thailand, and we've been developing some wallet application for a few government agencies around. So for private wallet, the adoption has been slow in Thailand in particular. The way I see that the most likely scenario, this is like specifically in Thailand, right? The two most likely scenario for adoption of wallet in Thailand is that one is like there's a strong push from the government. So I would guess it would be similar to EADAS and FC in Europe, where there's like a strong funding from the government pouring money to the ecosystem, right? The second way is perhaps from an external force that there's like, for example, there might be a collaboration between Europe and Asia or in Thailand, and then these external force created incentive for the company in Thailand to start adopting and using wallet and credentials. So as of right now in Thailand, the adoption has been slow. There are multiple companies experimenting in the space, but the issue right now is like right now we have like an archipelagos of different wallet implementation, and they're not really interoperating with each other. So it's like there's like a many closed ecosystem, but they don't talk to each other. So that is the state that we are right now.
Interesting. Alan, you said something interesting. You said that the web server making a TLS connection to a browser is sort of asserting the identity of the company. Did I hear you right? Is that what you were saying? Is that when I make a connection to google.com?
No, I would say it just asserts a relationship to a domain name, right? But we know that companies can own multiple domain names, and their domain name
Right.
might not even be like their official like identifier. But having, like, for example, in Europe, business registries are quite well evolved, right? So one can already today, in context of IDAS, also create a link between a business identifier like a VAT number and another public or private key, and then also kind of advertise that key, those keys and certificates via domain name. So there's already, I would say, a ground to express these different relationships. It's of course not really. Some of them are standardized, some of them are not, but at least it's a baseline how to showcase what are the options to start like connecting these different identifiers and proofs. And because if we think of, like, if we just think about what I said, right? So on one hand we have a domain name registry, and on the other hand we have like VAT, which is in the business registry, right? And the key, I would say, challenge is really to introduce a framework where companies can start proving that they own one or multiple, I would say, identifiers, which live in today completely isolated registries. And so today this is hard to do in a machine readable way. So the challenge is how to establish a framework where all these processes can like follow a similar, let's say, similar
We're
steps,
getting
right?
a
So that,
little, your audio is a little bit choppy.
okay.
And if you have to kill your audio, that your video, that's fine. Let's see how it goes. So you know what? Maybe we'll just take a stab at LEIs right now. So not to Alan mentioned that a domain name isn't necessarily let's say unique. An organization might have many domain names. Um, there is supposed to be some type of organizational verification that goes on when you register a domain name, but we know that sometimes that's not very rigorous, and the
Mhm.
process varies quite a bit depending upon which registry we're talking about. I forget how Let's Encrypt does it when they issue certificates. I think they use some type of proof where they send an email or they do something. Oh no, they make you change a DNS record in Let's Encrypt, and that shows that you have control of that domain. But this isn't let's say an extended due diligence that proves that you have control of that organization. It also doesn't help you correlate maybe organizations or tell who's associated. So maybe you could just talk a little bit about what is the role that we see LEI playing, and how might that help in the space of corporate wallets?
Right. So I think for corporate wallet, there's two. Well, I like to increase the scope a little. So instead of talking about corporate wallet, I like to talk it in terms of legal entity identity, right? Legal entity identity, and the reason is for charity, for example, charity is not a corporate, right? And if you talk about organization, then organization is too broad. For example, a family is also an organization, or like a music band is also an organization.
Yeah.
So I think for me, the best term to describe is a legal entity. So right. So legal entity, I look up a dictionary before the meeting. Is that a legal entity is a separate independent unit for legal purposes, right? And for me, I think that is like the best term to describe. So you can call it a legal entity wallet or legal entity identity. And
It's a
I think that's
geeky definition, but I like it. I say business
Mhm.
because I think like a government organization is still a business, but not a corporate. but I can go with your legal entity. I think that's a very technical term, and for this purpose of this conversation, probably a good way to think of it. But yeah, sorry to interrupt.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I think it's the right level to discuss this, because anything below a legal entity is not very useful in my opinion. Like you can talk about family or like school club, but they're not very helpful when you're
Mm-hmm.
talking about like identity management. And coming back to that, I think there's two aspects when you talk about legal entity identity, right? So one is the organization or the legal entity themselves, and the second is the people in that organization. And to create a framework or identity, it's basically, I think in a sense, it's about how you create a trust framework that connect these two people. Right? I mean, to connect the people and the organization, and then the relationship also cross organization. How the people in the organization interact and exchange information with the people in another organization. Right. So I think in a way that's like the legal entity identity framework in a nutshell, right? So they like provide a trust to this relationship. Coming back to that, for the LEI, the LEI is a unique number, right? That is supervised by GLIFE, which is a G20 organization. So this is a non-profit and international organization that is overseen by like many member states. If I remember correctly, it's like
An
50.
LEI itself
Yeah.
is an ISO standard, right? And GLIFE is the
Yes,
organization
exactly.
that's authorized by ISO to manage these. Am I right?
Yes, exactly. Yes. So LEI, I think the reason is unique is that first is maintained by a non-profit organization, right? They are competing identifier, right? For example, there are DUNS number DUNS, right? But DUNS is supervised by a for-profit organization,
Yeah.
right? I believe it has much more adoption than LEI. In fact, I just checked yesterday; it has like 500 millions DUNS number or something, and but
Uh-huh.
part of the reason because it's free, right?
Yeah.
It's free to register for DUNS number. But the problem is, I think,
because I don't really trust that data that much. I don't think it's
yeah,
great data.
yes.
Yeah.
And I think to register for DUN number is free, but to access the information of the company that register for DUN numbers, that is not free. I think you have to pay for Dun and Bradstreet to access those information.
Right.
For LEI, it's the other way around. You have to pay to register, but it's free to access the information, company information.
Interesting.
So
Yeah.
for me, LEI provide like a very good foundation to create an identity framework for legal entities.
So this is a very identity office hours issue. We have a title like corporate wallets, and then we spend the first half of it saying, what is corporate? And Alan, so this LEI or DUNS number, I think what we're saying is that okay, if we want to go into this area of organizational wallets or legal entity wallets, we have to agree what the legal entity is. Do you see that as a major stumbling point, or are we spending too much time on the things that actually don't matter, and we should focus more on sort of the use cases? And I'm curious if you have any thoughts on is this identity issue really an existential issue for corporate wallets, or is it just sort of a technicality?
I mean, okay, can you hear me well now?
Yeah, it sounds better now.
Okay, well, I mean, we need to understand how. So I think understanding these identifiers and their roles is important, because behind every identifier or assignment of an identifier, there's a process, right? There's an identification process. And today we see that companies need like a number of different identifiers, because each and every domain has their own, let's say, company identification rules and onboardings, right? And today these processes are not recognized, right? So, for example, it's not taken from granted that if you have a VAT, that you can use like a proof or an that you own a VAT to onboard to a different domain. I know just opening a bank account requires much more just than just that. So really, it's not so much about the identifiers, but the process that's behind it, right? That's one point. But second important issue, but these are all opportunities for that organizational wallets could solve, right? Now, today you cannot easily prove or verify these facts. So, for example, I mean, in Europe, it's I think established, so you can get a digitally signed or sealed PDF document stating information about your information in the business registry. But this is quite like limited. It always takes time, and it's not something you can do like automatically. And I think these challenges of like onboarding companies, reusing the information and proving that they own identifiers, and with it proving that they done the processes of onboarding and proofing, this is what becomes valuable for the companies, because then opening, I don't know, a bank account or registering as a service could really be streamlined to something that is today just a single login, agreeing with sharing your data, or in this case, company data. And on the other hand, relying party can, in a fully machine-readable way, receive the data, verify the data, who issued, when, whether it's revoked or not. And this is, in my personal opinion, like a door, like something that really opens the door to all the other use cases, and start seeing and thinking about what organizational wallets could enable companies, right?
It's an interesting point, because in the citizen space, we talk about foundational identity, the ability of a person to assert their identity and, let's say, open a bank account. But you make a good point about how in the business world, that's also a pain in the neck. I actually kind of am always amused at this, when I open a bank account here in the US, yes, there has to be a physical US person, but to prove the corporate ownership, I generally send them some fax back copies of my approved, I forget what they call it, certificate of incorporation from Delaware. It's very, very I don't know, it's not proving cryptographic ownership. It's a much lower level of proof that's used. And so it's almost like what you're saying is that the idea of the corporate wallet is that we're providing a way for this organization to bind some type of cryptographic material to be able to really prove control of the organization. So it's not that where, like, I originally thought that these are corporate wallets for workforce or employees or partners, but this is a corporate wallet for the corporation itself. Am I on the right track?
Yeah. I think so. So in my personal view, this is the biggest use. I mean, this is the biggest use case, because to be honest, for employee wallets, So once you have this resolved, the employee wallets are far simpler, because companies already have identity and access management systems in place, right? So it's just a matter of expressing those rights and relationships that are relevant to the outside world in a machine-readable way, which, in my naive thinking, to say so, it's a bit simpler than what we're trying to address here with all these identifiers and data sharing, and like cryptographically proving ownership of different documents.
Nandu, I'm curious if you have any thoughts about this, because we talked about the LEI, which is the identifier, but we didn't talk about the mechanism through which you prove control of that identifier. Has any of your research in the innovation space at Finima led you to think about this challenge?
Well, might not be answering your question directly, but so for me, the question that I'm interested in is how to make an organization or legal entity ID that is global, right? So how to make the framework so that all companies or all organizations in the world can cryptographically prove the ownership or the fact that they signed a document to another company or organization across the world, right? And coming back to the identifiers, to build such an ecosystem in a way that anywhere in the world trusts the document that is signed or trust the message or data from the other company, right? Like for example, Finima in Thailand, we sign a document sent to you in the US, and you check and verify, and you believe the message and trust the framework. So how we make this kind of framework a reality, right? So you need like a global scale, a trust framework to make that happen. And I think coming back to that, I think to a very good starting point for that would be starting with the authoritative source, right? Because all the company, all the legal entity, they have to be registered somewhere. And basically, every country has its own respective agency for registering the organization, right? And I think that is where we need to get started. So that is like the starting point, right? And then these registration agency would then give numbers to the company organization in that countries. But the problem is these identifier, they're only relevant in that jurisdiction. So in Thailand, every company has a 13-digit number, and that is widely used to identify organization in Thailand. But this number is useless outside Thailand, right? So I think we need another set of identifier that is unique, but is recognized globally. And I think this is the reason why we're talking about LEI or DUNS numbers, right? So we need another identifier that is unique and recognized everywhere. And then, from my opinion, then we build the framework on top of those systems, right? So starting with the AS, authoritative sources, and you provide it with a global unique identifier, right? And then you build an identity framework or ecosystem on top of that. So that's how I see it works.
I'm
I
curious,
would,
Alan,
Mike. Yeah, may I? I would like to challenge this a bit, if I may.
Sure.
Because like from experience, so solving the problems of identifiers by introducing a new identifier, I don't believe this will really work. I think the keyword here is like recognition, or so first the ability to express processes and I don't know, maybe standards or regulations used to perform like an onboarding and issuing a credential, an identifier. And then on the other hand, we don't need to go cross-border, but even within a country or a member state, recognition of those processes, right? So many of these processes exist. Many of trust relationships are established, but these are not expressed in a digital way so that those can be clearly understood. And let me give you a very simple example. How do you check whether a university is a university? For example,
Wikipedia.
Yeah, but so like in real life, like so some of these documents might be like 20, 30, 50 years old. They're only digital scans of it, or not even that, or they're written in languages that only, I don't know, 2 million people understand, and it's hard to translate and figure out whether or not this is still the same entity. But this very, like, digitalizing this very simple piece of information is crucial to what's was mentioned before, to start then to be able to express this information and then build on top of that. And that, in my like, at least from what I see from use cases can decide I can start accepting this particular credential or identifier because now I understand what's the process behind, and I can understand what's the assurance for really like for this identifier to being valid and so on and so forth. And this like builds on a premise that trust is relative. I don't believe there's an absolute trust. And that we will like achieve this absolute trust anytime soon, but at least starting from like putting these bits and pieces together will help us to digitalize and have like information that we need to verify basic statements about organizations in a digital form, right? So, but it's I think it's critical to do. So this is something that's critical to do, but it's not an easy task, of course. It's far more complicated than it sounds.
I think it's a fair point, which is that yes, the identification is one part of the challenge, but it doesn't get you necessarily very far because you don't know the processes and procedures behind this organization. And they say that trust emanates from doing the same thing over again for a long time. And so without you might have the identifier without a window into sort of the how the what the how the company operates and how it vets and handles this information, you don't really have trust. You just and so Nadu, do you have any thoughts about how we go about building trust in the ecosystem beyond the identifiers? Is this something that you've looked at all? Or I understand if I'm asking this question out of nowhere, maybe you have no opinion either, but I'm just curious your thoughts on how to build trust.
Right. If you're talking about trust, I think the most important part is the root of trust, right? So how we make and manage the root of trust of the ecosystem. So what I was saying earlier, right? I was talking about like a global identifier system. So what I meant was basically to create a global root of trust that everyone in the world trusts for the ecosystem. And I think to summarize what Alan said earlier is basically we that might not be realistic, and we might create like many different root of trust in the world, and then create a framework that like joining them together. Would that be an accurate like paraphrasing or summarization of what you were saying?
Yeah, I would like to raise one other point, especially when it comes to trust. Are you familiar with the Certificate Transparency Initiative?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so
So,
why don't you just remind the audience in case they're not?
so Certificate Transparency is an initiative where organizations essentially set up a public ledger where they are recording all the TLS certificates that are issued, and then everyone can check like the full history of certificates, where certificates have been issued, whether they are still valid. And there are multiple such ledgers, and then depending on the lifetime of a certificate, you need to append that certificate to either 1, 2, or 3, or even more ledgers, and these all ledgers are public, and you have a full trace, or you have full logs of this events, and these are append-only ledgers.
Right. And just to qualify a little bit, so like Google wants to know if somebody else registers a google.com domain, and these certificate ledgers help these companies monitor and make sure that not only have they validly issued their domain, but nobody's impersonating them. Right, Alan?
Correct.
That's part of the goal, right?
Yes, and also to check and monitor the quality of the certificates, right? But I'm bringing this up because also we started with I'm working in a blockchain space, right? And I mean, or with blockchain technologies, at least small part of it. And when it comes to trust, it's really what really strikes me is that currently we are using so if we look at the design of certificates transparency, it's essentially a poor man's blockchain, right? So there's a public ledger. It's append only. It's for monitoring the quality and ensuring that all the rules are followed. And this is when I believe that if you have such an infrastructure that can scale, and here we're talking only about one domain, which is just proving an ownership of a domain name, right? You're not talking about a heterogeneous framework where you can have VAT identifiers, IBAN identifiers, and all bunch of, I don't know, brand ownership and so on, where different rules and policies apply to different such credentials. So here it's interesting, maybe thought or something to reflect on. On the other hand, the blockchain technology does have all these properties and does enable to have like full transparency and also to integrate these verification rules in an automated way. So in this sense, the technologies that are being used today globally at what we could call the biggest trust framework, because it is the biggest one, so they issue like the volume of certificates is the largest, they main the roots of trust, they have the verification processes, and now this is something what we essentially try to mimic in other domains. So it's an interesting thought and something interesting thing to look at and reflect on.
So it sounds like what you're saying is that ISO has this sort of top-down approach where we're going to create an organization that's going to issue identifiers. They're going to vet organizations. They're going to issue identifiers. It's a very top-down approach. And it sounds like what you're saying, Ellen, is that maybe there's another approach to achieve this that doesn't require creating this sort of top-down infrastructure and approach.
Yeah, this is one, but the second one is so key to have like a healthy ecosystem is to have an ability to monitor the information and also for everyone to verify the information, right? Because if everything is public, available to everyone, and you make sure it cannot be easily deleted, it's very easy also to put in a monitoring system that would detect misuse, right? Because we see there are many data breaches with the data. So if data is breached, also private materials are breached, which means that private keys can be accessed. So we need also think of the what we could call to have some kind of fundamental infrastructure to support the use cases and also allow for real transparency and traceability of all the actions, because that's the only way we can really detect if something went wrong, and also then to either revoke stuff and so on and so forth. So these are the two. These are the 2 points I would like to maybe raise here.
This is getting above my pay grade, this conversation. Do you have any thoughts on Ellen's ideas here? Would that help, or is that do you see any opportunity for blockchain or other technologies to make this more transparent?
Right. Probably to add more to what Alan just said is that when we're talking about framework about identity, right, there's always at least two layers on that. One is the technical layers, right? It's about establishing the cryptographic trust or the technical trust of the ecosystem. So I think the blockchain or other similar technology is only half of the framework, right? It's about basically being a public key infrastructure or providing the technical trust. But then you need to also build another framework that is just purely human trust, right? For example, who is the I think in this case would be EIDAS, right? EIDAS 2.0 in Europe is the human layer, while the FC can provide the technical layer for that, right? So the human layer is about like who is the supervising body, who create a rule for identity verification, what is the standard for verifying identity, and who accrediting the wallet, which wallet provider are trustworthy, which one are not, and who gets certified or like standard.
Interesting. So, this is the second episode where I've gone in, and I thought it was about one thing when we started, and it turned out it was about something totally different. So, Alan, I'm going to ask you this question: why did you call us corporate wallets? And why do you think that, or why do you use the word wallet there? Because I think it was a little bit surprising for me. Do you think that eventually this will be like a corporate wallet, and I just missed that, or why do you think corporate wallet was an apt sort of description for this session?
I see corporate wallet as more. So I see corporate wallet as a logical structure and something that allows company. So I think corporate wallets are the ones that will enable to the next generation digitalization of company data and information sharing. We're not there yet, but it is a logical structure, right? That will consist of several elements. And currently this is the name that's used. So legal entity or wallet or corporate wallet, this is what's being used in the domain as this logical structure that allows companies then to share and prove claims and about that others asserted about the company, of course.
Okay, learning something new. We're coming up sort of to the end. Natawut, do you have any last thoughts before we announce the next episode?
Sure. If you're talking about the corporate or organization wallet, I think we can look at the two case study that is quite similar. So I think one is the DNSX, and another one is the machine readable travel document from iCal. So these two are you can, in a way, is for organization, right? So for iCal, passport is the country issuing a passport or travel document. And for DNSSEC is about the domain names. And the reason I brought up these two is that these two has an opposite way to manage the root of trust. For DNSSEC, DNSSEC has a single root of trust that is managed by ICANN, right? So ICANN has a community that manage a single root of trust, and that is a single point of trust for the entire of DNSSEC ecosystem. Basically, the trust for the internet, right? So that is the single root of trust model. The second one is for the iCal. So iCal is very different. So very different is that each country has its own root of trust, right? And iCal doesn't have any. iCal only set the rule and set the governing framework that all the country follow, but each country manage their own root of trust. So I see that when we talking about the corporate wallet, I can see that there's two ways for us to move forward, right? So it'd be a single root of trust model or a multiple root of trust model. And I think this is where I and Alain probably disagree in my opinion. So in my opinion, I think I would prefer for the single root of trust model due to from the security perspective that is more it's create a more unifying and a hierarchical structure that provide a better security property. But I probably won't have time to go for that. Yeah. But yeah, thank you.
That's a helpful way to think about it. Alan, any last thoughts before we announce the next episode?
Yeah, very briefly. Why I believe that having this organizational wallet is crucial to solve the natural person identity problem is because people always authenticate or present their online identity asserted by other organizations, and organizations only accept personal identities asserted by other companies, right? So having this sorted out and the trust frameworks is in place, I truly believe that really simplifies the natural online natural person identity. But this is an open challenge, so I invite everyone to challenge this thought. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, one of the things I love about doing this live stream is that I learn something on every episode. And this has definitely been true here. I want to make a quick announcement about next week's episode. We're going into the product management space, and we're going to talk about how to design safe. It's called Product Manager Strategies for Trust and Safety, but how to design safe products. And so I'm excited about that. And I just want to remind everyone to follow Identity Office Hours on LinkedIn. It has its own company page. I attach that link to all of my tweets or LinkedIn posts, I should say. So please follow. We're trying to get to 1,000 followers, in which case we get special privileges on LinkedIn. So help us get there. And thank you to Alan and Natawut for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, audience. And we will see you next Tuesday.